record this lesson. So here we have the graph, which was made by Richards and Rogers in their book, which is called Approaches and Methods in Language Teaching in 2001. So here we have the development of language teaching methodology. The first and the ancient method is grammar translation method. It was originated from 14th century or 15th century, and it was dominated until 1900s. And then after this method, we have the direct method, the oral approach, audiolingual, which were started to develop in 50s and 60s. And after this, we have communicative language teaching, total physical response, the silent ways, Gestapedia, community language learning, the lexical approach, which were developed in 1970s and 1980s. And the last one, cooperative learning, content-based learning, task-based learning, which were dominated until 1990s. And we are going to study about the grammar translation and the direct method. So grammar translation method. Here we have the definition, which was made by Richard Smith. A method of foreign language or second language teaching, which makes use of translation and grammar study as the main teaching and learning activities. So grammar translation, it says by itself that it aims on translation and grammar. It studies the translation and grammar. So it focuses on sentence structure, grammar, vocabulary, and direct translations from the native language to English or vice versa. So what is grammar translation? So it is the most traditional, one of the most traditional methods. It was originally used to teach dead languages as Latin and Greek, which involved little or no spoken communication or listening communication. There were only translation of literature, reading literature, translation or learning grammar of that language, or learning vocabulary. Aims of grammar translation method: to read literature in a target language, to memorize grammar rules and vocabulary of the target language, as I have mentioned before. So to read literature in a target language, English IELTS. If you study IELTS development or English language development, how they tested English language in Cambridge, you will see that at the beginning they tested only reading and writing. They tested only how they can read and write on that language, and there were no attention to the speaking and listening. So grammar translation method. Let's study the history of development of grammar translation method. As you know, in the 16th century, Latin, before Latin was very popular, but now in the 16th century, Latin was no longer the dominant international language, but it became as a subject in the school curriculum. They used to study Latin proverbs, Latin words, Latin grammar. They used to translate Latin books. And in the 17th century, they started to use this method to study another foreign languages. So they studied analysis of grammar and rhetoric of Latin, and they used the same way to study foreign languages, to study English, French, and other. And by the 19th century, this method was the standard way of studying the foreign languages, and it was known as the Prussian method. And this method was dominated between 1840s and 1940s. So the first way of using grammar translation method was to study or teach dead languages and literatures of such languages as Latin and Greek. Sorry. So here, it is still used in situations where understanding literary texts is the primary focus of foreign language study, and there is little need for a speaking knowledge of the language. So we see that there was no attention to the speaking knowledge or listening knowledge in the grammar translation method. There were a lot of attention only for reading and writing, and most of the time to grammar, vocabulary, and translation. So here we have the principles of grammar translation method. The first principle of grammar translation is ability to read the literature of that language. It was back then in the history. And ability to translate one language to another language. And also to develop reading and writing skills, as I have mentioned before, and there was no attention to speaking and listening. And the teacher was the authority of the classroom, and also to find each translation for each word in the target language. But we see now that it is impossible to find equivalents for any word from the target language in our mother tongue. We can only find long explanations. So grammar translation method nowadays is not popular, and teacher nowadays is not the authority in the classroom. But when I studied at the schools, we used to learn foreign languages. We used to learn English using grammar translation method, because we used to use Soviet Union books where they wrote these books using grammar translation method. We had texts, and we should read them and then answer to the questions after this text, and do exercises, grammar exercises, to learn grammar rules, to translate the words, to learn words, vocabulary by heart. We are going to come to these points here. So the grammar translation, what kind of features the grammar translation method have? The first one, the teaching of grammar is deductive. Explicit teaching of grammar. What does it mean, deductive? Deductive means that the teacher introduces the rules, and then students will give examples to these rules. They learn by heart these rules, and then they find examples. They give examples according to these rules. So as we studied at schools. For example, we studied present simple or present past simple, and they gave us the formula, gave us the rules, and we should learn by heart these rules. As for example, if it is a present continuous, M is R and ing, and we used to give examples to this formula, and this is the grammar translation method. And students are supposed to memorize the rules. The same way we studied Russian, as you know. We used to learn by heart the rules of the grammar. For example, what is noun, what is verb, and we all know until now. We can remember all of these rules. But there was a problem that even if we know by heart these rules, it is really hard for us to speak to comprehend that language. And also the teacher, when he explained these rules, he used comparison and contrast between the target language and the native language. So the teacher make a comparison of a present simple and, for example, present simple in the Russian language, for example, настоящее время в русском языке, and the present simple in the English language. They used to make a comparison, but it was very difficult to understand because there was a huge difference in grammar between the target language and the native language. And the next feature is translation was a common way to clarify the meaning of the new grammar. So we used to translate each word. We used to translate and learn by heart the translation of the word, but it was not useful for us to learn, for example, 10 words or 20 words in one day. So it was impossible. If we don't use these words in the context, in the situation, we, after some time, will forget all of these words. So here, the main points of teaching techniques of the grammar translation method. As we have mentioned, translation of a literary passage, reading comprehension questions. It's the main features. When you see these features, you can know that this method is grammar translation method. And the next, to find antonyms and synonyms, cognates, which means relative words, for example, as well as synonyms. Deductive application of rules, as we have mentioned above. Deductive application, it means you have the rule and you should give an example. Fill in the blanks, memorization of the vocabulary, use words in sentences. It means just use words in sentences. For example, you have 10 words and you should make 10 sentences for 10 words. And composition, it's writing, for example, write and composition to the text or to the book which you have read. So what kind of activities we use in grammar translation method? For example, write 5 vocabulary words from your favorite song, find it, and translate it into English. And the next is to use the deductive learning of grammar to give rules, and then students should give examples to these rules. And the next one is take down the conversations of your friends. For example, if your friends will speak in Russian, you will write down their conversation, make a dialogue, for example, and then translate this dialogue into English. But we know that we have the culture differences, that in translation, English people don't speak like that, even if it is a translation. And the next one is to write 10 words from the article, and then to find synonyms or antonyms to these 10 words. And you see that here we have verbs. To write 10 verbs, it means to learn grammar. And the last one is to memorize at least 5 words in a day. So it means just to learn 5 words in a day was not enough to be able to speak, to be able to learn that language. So that was grammar translation method. Now we are going to come to the direct method. Why it is called direct method? So direct method is named direct because meaning is connected directly with the target language, and there was no translation into the native language. And also we know that in direct method we don't use our native language. We use only the target language, even if we should find the translation of the word. We are not going to find the translation, we are going to find the meaning of the word in order to learn this word. So other names of direct method. It is also called as the natural method, phonetical method, anti-grammatical method, and reform method. Because why it is called anti-grammatical method? Because it was in contrast with grammar translation method. It was pointed at speaking and listening more than in reading and writing, because grammar translation was there was a lot of attention into reading and writing and grammar. But in direct method, we pay attention on speaking and listening. Why it is called natural method? Because it uses the same pattern, the same way of learning the language as we learned our mother tongue, as we learned our native language. So why it is called natural method? We don't use translation, we don't use other languages. We use the same way as we learned our mother tongue. Why it is called the reform method? Because it changed education, it changed the way of learning the foreign language. So the goal for teachers in direct method, to teach students how to communicate in the target language. How to do that is to teach students to think in the target language, not to find translation. Most of the time at schools, we used to translate in our mind. When people speak in English, we used to translate in our mind first to understand them. We are going to translate what they said, and then we are going to translate what we are going to say, and then give answer. That was very difficult. And in direct method, we are going to teach students how to think in that language in order to make it easy to communicate naturally. So if we come to the history of direct method, it was originated in Germany and France around 1900s. And it was, as I have mentioned before, a contrary, opposite to the grammar translation method and other schools, for example, Dodson's bilingual schools. And also it was used by key international language schools such as Berlitz and in Lingua, and many of the language departments of the Foreign Service Institute of the United States State Department in 2012. So here we have direct method aims and objectives. The first is to build a direct connection between experience and language, word and idea, thought and expression. So here we have thought and expression. It means to think in that language. Experience is to connect with the real life of students with the language, which was known in grammar translation. And word and ideas, the same. We are not going to learn only words by heart every day. We are going to use them in practice. We are going to use them in situations, for example, in role plays. In direct method, for example, teacher can show how to cook, for example, and he will teach students the words related to the cooking. For example, he can bring to the class apples and start to cut them and start to prepare something. And the second one is to enable students to learn how to communicate in the target language. As I have mentioned before, for this aim, we are going to teach students how to think in that language. In order to teach students how to communicate in the target language, we are going to teach them how to think in that language. And the last one is the learner should experience the new language the same way we experience his mother tongue. So I have mentioned that the other name for direct method was the natural method. That means to the natural way of learning languages. For example, when we are born, we don't know any language, and then we learn our mother tongue, but naturally, unconsciously, not using any books, any grammar. We just listen to the language. We just watch and see. We see the situations. We see the things, and we learn their names. We see the situations and ideas, and we learn the names. We learn the words of these situations, and we learn the language in this way. So direct method's aim is to do the same with the learning of target language, with the foreign language. So in other words, the natural approach to language teaching and or natural method, which is the other name for direct method. So most of the scientists, many scientists, try to make learning foreign language in the way of learning the first language. They try to make the same pattern, the same way to learn the foreign language as the mother tongue. So here we have the next one. A foreign language could be taught without translation or the use of learner's native tongue if meaning was conveyed directly through demonstration and action. So in direct method, we should use demonstration and action to teach foreign language. As the same we learned our mother tongue through demonstrations and actions. Through demonstration the things, and by acting we show the situations and abstract meanings. So here we have principles and procedures of direct method. I'm sorry, I'm watching the time. So here, the principles of direct method. Classroom instructions was conducted exclusively in the target language. So in direct method, we use only the target language in the classroom, even though our students or learners will not understand. We use only the target language because we learn the language in the same way as we learn our mother tongue. So only everyday vocabulary and sentences were taught. So only everyday vocabulary and sentences, that means the language which was used naturally. It's at the beginning of the language, right? But in grammar translation, they were taught literary language and how to read and how to write, but it was really hard and difficult for the beginners. But in everyday vocabulary, we used the language, we used to learn the language in the same way as we have acquired our mother tongue. Oral communication skills were built up in a carefully graded program, right? So progression. Oral communication skills, it means speaking skills, were built up in a carefully graded. So speaking skills also were organized in the sequence to learn speaking skills. Grammar was taught inductively. What does it mean, the word inductively? On the grammar translation method, we used to taught grammar deductively. So deductively means in grammar translation method is to learn grammar by learning rules. First, you should learn the rule and then give an example. But in inductive learning, inductive approach here in learning grammar, we use situations. First, we see the situation, we learn the situation, and then we learn grammar according to the situation. For example, if we are dreaming of something, if we dream about something, we use conditionals, right? So in the same way, grammar was taught inductively, not like we should use first past simple and then present simple and then like this. Grammar was not like graded. It was taught inductively by using situations and then studying grammar according to these situations. New teaching points were introduced orally. The same was in the first point here. A concrete vocabulary was taught through demonstration, as we have mentioned before. Objects and pictures. Abstract vocabulary was taught by association of ideas. So here we have two kind of vocabulary, right? Concrete vocabulary, it means concrete things, objects, And like animals, for example, if we can find an animal to bring into the classroom, we can find a picture of that animal. If we can bring an object, or we can show a demonstration and teach in this way new vocabulary to the students. Um, and the abstract, what about the abstract vocabulary, which cannot be presented as an object or cannot be demonstrated? It was taught by association of ideas. And the next one, both speech and listening comprehension were taught, as we have studied before. In grammar translation, we taught only reading and writing, but in direct method, we teach speaking and listening. Correct pronunciation and grammar were emphasized. So here we use also not only grammar, we teach grammar, but also we teach pronunciation, speaking, listening. We teach grammar inductively. So here we have the guidelines for teaching oral language contemporary Berlitz schools. As I have mentioned before, direct method was also used in Berlitz school and in Lingua schools. They were the first schools who used direct method. So here we have opposite to the grammar translation method. For example, if we have in a grammar translation method to translate, so here we have never translate but demonstrate, never explain but act, never make a speech, ask questions. So it means so not to speak too much for the teacher. Students must speak. Never imitate mistakes, correct, never speak with single words, use sentences, and never speak too much, make students speak. It's the same with the third point here. Never use the book, use your lesson plan. So often in the grammar translation method, we use books, but it was very boring. So here we use our lesson plan as brainstorming, like warm-up exercises, which were not in our books. We use some games, some interactive technologies to make our lesson more interesting, but not only the book. So keep the pace of student here. We must wait until students will comprehend or acquire all the language and speak normally. It means all these 3 points: speaks normally, not speak slowly, not speak quickly, not speak loudly, and so on. It means to speak naturally, to speak in a natural way, but not as in grammar translation method. So here we have other points of direct method. It means to reading aloud, question answer exercises, self-correction, conversation practice. You see here we have the self-correction, but in grammar translation we had that the teacher was the authority of the classroom. So in the grammar translation method, teacher always corrected students, but in direct method we have self-correction, or we can also add here peer correction, right? If you know, self-correction, it means when the student find the mistakes by themselves using teacher's support. And also we have peer correction. When other students can find, and maybe they can find the mistakes together. Conversation practice, here we have conversation practice. It means students must have a discussion, have debate. And here we have exercise, the same exercise as in direct method, but they are with combination of direct method exercises. So when we come to the evaluation, how is evaluation accomplished in direct method? So here we have no formal evaluation in the class. It means we're not going to point so that to the students, say to the students that you are that you have 2 or you have 3, or maybe you have C, or you have B, or you have A. So we just can tell them you are good. good job, wonderful, great, and etc. And use the language orally, not in written form. Oral interviews by the teacher, written assignment about something, encouraging self-correction, which I have mentioned before about self-correction and peer correction. Here we have the graphic or the spider web, in other words, of the direct method.